welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. This is a show for students of life who are seeking real knowledge about how to flourish. Now, I love this term, students of life. I think of myself as a student of life because I believe that to flourish in life, to succeed in an integrated way, both material and mental, I need as much knowledge as I can get about the causes of human flourishing. And the problem in the world that most bothers me and fascinates me is that human beings like me lack reliable access to that knowledge, the knowledge we need to flourish. And this is a problem even for the most ambitious students of life. And I think the reason is because we've been taught to pursue knowledge in the wrong way. We've been taught to pursue knowledge by continually seeking new claims to knowledge. When we're looking for knowledge, we look for new claims about subjects like nutrition, psychology, relationships, and health. And we're hoping that the next article or podcast or book or TED Talk is finally going to give us that real knowledge that we really need and really want. And I think this is the wrong route. I think the real solution is, instead of seeking new claims to knowledge, let's seek new knowledge systems. Let's seek out sets of processes that we can use to acquire knowledge, real knowledge, to apply it, and to explain it to others. And I believe that if we as individuals and societies can upgrade our knowledge systems, if that's our focus, we'll actually solve this problem of not having reliable access to the knowledge we need to flourish. We'll have far greater success, and that will really mean years added to our lives, and just as importantly, life added to our years. So that's I just want to set out at the beginning of every episode from now on. This is the mission. We're seeking real knowledge about how to flourish, and we're trying to do it by developing and applying new and better knowledge systems, not just looking for the latest claim that somebody has. Now, on last week's show, which was the second episode, I shared some of my current thinking on what I call knowledge acquisition systems for getting us real knowledge. And I divide knowledge acquisition systems into three core capabilities. We need to be able to effectively seek potential knowledge about human flourishing. We need to validate it so we get real knowledge instead of non-knowledge or fake knowledge. And then we need to integrate it all together so that we can really use it. And for each capability we discussed, I shared a process or two that I found really helpful that I hoped people could use immediately. For example, when talking about validation, I talked about how I find it extremely helpful to, when I hear any new claim, I initially classify it as non-knowledge. I don't feel the need to say, oh, this is true or this is false. I say, okay, at first, I just don't know. And I find that super helpful for then later deciding, okay, is this true or false, or do I still not know, and being okay with not knowing. And at the end of the episode, I asked listeners to think about what are your own validation processes that you think are effective that you want to share. And we've been sharing things on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Human Flourishing Project. And there were some really great answers, really good discussions initiated. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. And also, I should say, if you have any thoughts about the project that you want to share with me privately, you don't want to necessarily put on a Facebook page, just email me at alex@alexepstein.com. I would really love to know anything at this stage about your thoughts on the project, what I've covered so far, what could be clearer, what could be better. We're still at the outset, and we're in such new territory in terms of just people aren't really talking about this systems focus to life-enhancing knowledge, and I just want to make it as useful as possible to all the other students of life whom I think want this kind of knowledge just as I do, because I'm really trying to be your agent. All right, now, at the end of last week, I said that this week I would go from talking about acquisition systems for human flourishing knowledge to explanation systems. And explanation systems are so important in us getting the knowledge that we need, because if people who produce knowledge and who have the right knowledge, I often call them knowledge producers, if they can be really good at persuasively explaining their views and differentiating them from others, then our society is just going to be amazing by comparison to what it is now. Because it's so much easier for us to get good knowledge if the people with the best knowledge are really good at explaining it. So I had intended to cover that today, but I was thinking about it and I just had an instinct that I wanted to go in a bit of a different direction. I wanted to follow that, and I really try to think about what's really going to be most useful right now. And there's a topic that I think is just so crucial to cover early on in this enterprise. And so I decided I'm going to cover this today, and then we'll talk about explanation in one of the upcoming episodes. And we can think of today's topic as part of what I call our knowledge application system, how we use knowledge in our actual lives. And this is one aspect of that, though. And it's one of the highest leverage systems, mental systems that you can upgrade. And what it is, it's our measuring system, or measurement system, I should say, for growth and progress. So our measurement system for growth and progress. This is a show really about growth and progress of our minds. And there's a fascinating and actually often very upsetting phenomenon that I see with growth and progress that I've found challenging myself, and then I know so many people find this challenging, which is that when we're in a state of growth and progress, we often don't enjoy it nearly as much as we would like to. And there are certain reasons for this. And I was experiencing this actually this week and last week. I was thinking about this for myself and reminding myself of certain things I've figured out. And there are certain tools that I use that I'll talk about that have just been incredibly helpful for me, because in starting this project, which I've been thinking about for a year and a half, and I'm so passionate about and requires so much careful thought and expenditure of energy, and I already have a lot of other stuff going on. This is a period of rapid growth and progress for me. And I was noticing that in this period, I would notice a lot of areas where I could see, oh, wow, I made a bunch of mistakes in the past. And also I can see a lot of areas where I see, oh, wow, there's so much potential in the future. And I think that if I think about it a certain way, I can really enjoy it. But if I think about it the conventional way, I won't enjoy it nearly as much. And I think that in general, people often, when they're in these periods of growth and progress, they're really hard on themselves and they don't get anywhere near as much enjoyment as they can. And it's hard for me to think of a greater tragedy than people who are doing amazing things and growing and progressing and really producing value that leads to human flourishing for others, but they're not sufficiently enjoying it themselves. And I think that's an epidemic. And so in having this program where I'm sharing all these insights about human flourishing that I'm hoping will be really dramatic, at least some of them, I'm hoping will be really dramatic for your life and will lead you to all sorts of growth and progress, I want to talk about from the outset, okay, how do we enjoy this as much as possible? And I believe it comes down to how we internally think about and measure growth and progress. And to give you an indication of how I've come to think of this, I want to tell you a story from when I was 22 going on 23 years old. I was at the beginning of my career as a writer. I had decided that I wanted to be an applied philosopher outside academia, that I wanted to write about different kinds of issues and apply philosophical thinking to those issues. And just as today, it's quite hard to make it as a writer directly out of college. And I had started writing professionally when I was a junior in college, when I was at Duke. So I had been proactive in trying to get on top of things so I could get paid to write. But I was not able to write at a pace and with a quality level, combining those two, where I could make money, where I could make a lot of money, enough money to live. So I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and which is a fairly affordable place to live. But still, I was losing money, and if I remember correctly, probably racking up a certain amount of credit card debt. And it was starting to get depressing because I started feeling like a failure. Because in a certain sense, well, I was trying to support myself as a writer, and I wasn't succeeding as a writer, or at least I was not making money yet. And a friend of mine, who's still a friend of mine, named Craig Biddle, who he runs a publication, by the way, called The Objective Standard, which you can check out. I was talking to Craig, who is my neighbor in Richmond, and I was telling him about my situation, and I said something to the effect of, I have to admit, I've been failing so far. And he looked at me very quizzically, and to him this was bizarre. And he said, "What are you talking about?" Because he had been talking to me about my projects, and he said, do you realize, this isn't exact, obviously I didn't record it at the time, but here was the thrust of it. Do you realize how much progress you're making by dedicating yourself full time to writing, and how much that's going to benefit you? And then he said to me, well, do you understand how much people say invest or go into debt to become a doctor? So you're investing in your future. You're making a huge amount of progress, and this is going to benefit you so much in the future. So you're not failing at all. This is part of a success story. And I remember hearing this, and it just instantly changed my experience. I was feeling like a failure, and then I thought, no, what? He's right. I am succeeding. And I was taking the same actions before and after that experience, but my enjoyment of it was way different. And as I said before, this is so important to me that if I or anyone else am doing something really good, I want us to enjoy that thing. And so this experience with Craig, I think, reveals two truths that are sort of obvious, but that we don't utilize enough. Progress can have a huge impact on our happiness. Our method of evaluating personal progress, including growth, can have a huge impact on our happiness. Because again, nothing really changed in how I was approaching things before and after the conversation with Craig, at least not initially, but it was the same circumstances, the same core actions that I was evaluating, but he had given me a different way of evaluating it. And what this points to is, in general, we want to think a lot about how we evaluate our growth and progress. And there's incredible leverage in working on it. And I think there's so much leverage in working on it that it's worth investing huge amounts of time and even money on, say, our psychology, if we can figure out good ways to do it. And in my experience, this has been the case. There are three experiences in my life that I regard as incredibly helpful psychologically. Now, two of them have involved extreme expenditures of time and money. One was deciding in my mid-20s to go find a really good therapist and get help understanding myself and my emotions, and that I did for years, and it was incredibly helpful, but very difficult and expensive, but still worth it because the way in which I'm evaluating myself is just so important. So that was one. And then number two was deciding to start my own business, the Center for Industrial Progress, which I started in August of 2011. And I didn't intend that psychologically as a way to help myself enjoy life more, but just probably a lot of other business owners can attest to it, just that experience of creating something from nothing and facing the world in a completely responsible way where there are no excuses. I can't complain about anyone because it's all up to me. That whole experience was just amazingly positive psychologically. So those are great, but they take a lot of effort. Now, what was interesting about the interaction with Craig was this was an example of what I'm going to call underutilized truth number two. So one was that the method of evaluation can have a huge impact on happiness, but two is that there are some extremely efficient ways of improving our method. So maybe it makes sense to invest in these big ways, but maybe there are also small ways, because this one was just one conversation with one person, and it was incredibly beneficial. And that wasn't number three, by the way. That wasn't the third one. But the third one, which I'll share in a few minutes, that is something that's super, super simple. It's a super, super simple way of changing how we evaluate our personal progress is almost too simple, but it's incredibly high leverage. So that's the topic today. How do we change this evaluation? And I'll go into the third thing now, or the core of it, is that a few years ago, I met a guy named Dan Sullivan who runs a group called Strategic Coach. And Dan is a unique guy in the world of business and entrepreneurial advice because he is by far the person I've encountered in my reading and certainly in my personal experience who's most concerned about what I call human flourishing. And I know he now loves that term too. He's obsessed with human flourishing for the entrepreneur. Many people who are studying that area, they'll think of, okay, how can I benefit the consumer or how can I make more money? And of course, thinking about flourishing involves those. But Dan is obsessed with how can the entrepreneur really flourish, including enjoying the process of creating all this value. And I think that focus of seeking knowledge about human flourishing has led him to observe all sorts of things that other people just won't even think of. So what I'm going to share with you is a principle plus a tool that I learned from him, which I just found completely transformative and which I'll certainly use for the rest of my life. So first, the principle, and I'll give his terminology and then I'll explain it the way that I think about it. So he calls this idea of, his basic view, I'll give the terminology in a second, is that we're taught to evaluate our progress in a very self-defeating way. And he calls this the gap. So the gap is the distance between us and our ambitious future goals, or even some far-off theoretical ideal that's helping us set those goals. But it's at least the distance between us and our ambitious future goals. This is at least my understanding, by the way. I'll give you a reference if you want to see exactly how he explains it. And his observation is that while it's great to have these future goals, because it can be incredibly exciting and it can be enjoyable, that there's a big problem if we're trying to measure our growth and progress by the distance between now and those goals. And his observation is this is just endemic, that we're taught to think, okay, here's my goal in the future. So for example, I wanted to be a successful writer applying philosophy. Like that was my ambitious goal when I was 22. And I wasn't there. So I would think, okay, well, here's my ambitious goal and I'm not there. And therefore, I'm going to evaluate myself negatively. And that distance between the present and the future is what he calls the gap. And he talks about how people are living in the gap. And this is just a perpetual thing because if you're ambitious, you're always going to have goals about the future. And so if you're measuring yourself by the distance to the future and you're somehow using that to evaluate your progress, you're going to be negative. And that's what people experience all the time. They think, oh, I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll feel okay when I'm there, but it's basically, okay, I'm either there, in which case I'm okay, or I'm behind, in which case I feel negatively about it. And Dan is really, really good at not accepting ways of thinking about things that are going to make us miserable. He's always trying to think, okay, what's an actual, if I'm setting up this system of measurement, how can it be useful? And the answer that's simple but profound is what he calls the gain. So here's my formulation of the mindset shift, is that we need to stop measuring growth and progress by the negative distance to our ambitious future goals and start measuring the positive distance from our past capabilities and experiences. So again, we need to stop measuring growth and progress by the negative distance to our ambitious future goals and start measuring the positive distance from our past capabilities and experiences. So let's take my early writing career. Let's say when I was 20 years old, I decided, hey, I want to go into philosophy. I want to be a writer. At the time, I was just a computer science student, not exactly flourishing in that. And in a period of 2 years, I had just developed incredibly in terms of my capabilities and progress. I was so much of a better writer. I was a better thinker. My strategy for my career was better. I was becoming a completely different animal, but I wasn't appreciating it enough because I was living in the gap, as Dan Sullivan would say. But at the time, if I had done what Craig was really helping me do, but if I had understood the principle of measuring measuring backward in the sense of measuring the positive distance from the past capabilities and experiences, I would have much more enjoyed the process because I would be living in what Dan Sullivan calls the gain. I would be experiencing all the time, hey, wow, I'm making progress, I'm making progress, I'm making progress, and that would feed me. Sometimes people think, oh, if I'm not thinking negatively about myself in comparison to the future, I'm going to be unmotivated. I'll give you a tool in a minute for measuring the gain all the time. I think you'll find that's much, much more motivating. So there's this key mindset shift, which I hope everyone who listens to this adopts, which is, again, we're going to start measuring growth and progress by how much growth and progress we've actually been making. That's what we're going to focus on. We're not going to evaluate ourselves by how far we are from the future goals, because then the future goals become our enemy. They harm us in flourishing, particularly on the mental side of things. Versus if we can have those goals and be motivated by them, but then evaluate ourselves by how much growth and progress we've made, and then have that as forward momentum, then we're going to have the best of all worlds. We can have ambitious goals, and we can enjoy the process. So switching your system of measurement is just crucial. And to the extent you can do it, it's powerful. Now, certain things that cause us to do this are certainly to do the wrong thing, to live in the gap, to evaluate ourselves unfairly. Those are going to be psychologically entrenched in ways that can be difficult. So it's not necessarily that we can totally get rid of the wrong measurement system, but there is a way that we can make incredible progress. And this goes to the tool that Dan Sullivan created, which he calls the positive focus. And the positive focus is, in my experience, an incredible tool for, on a daily basis, helping yourself measure things in a really constructive, positive, and accurate way. And I should say, when I'm talking about something like this, if I ever recommend a tool or an idea, and I reference my personal experience, I have a commitment on this show, unless I say otherwise, that I'm only going to recommend things that A, I've used successfully myself for 6 months or more, so that I really see, okay, this is really a long-range, enduring thing. And then B, that I feel like I really understand the cause and effect of. So in this case, I've used this successfully for years now, and it's just been amazing to my life and my happiness. But also, I think I have a very good handle on the mechanism at work, which is changing how we're measuring progress. So that's why I'm confident in recommending this, just to give you some insight into how I'm validating things. So here's the positive focus. It's almost too simple. And whenever I'm around Dan Sullivan or people in his group, I'm always raving about, you got to do the positive focus. Obviously, Dan does it all the time, but other people, they might focus on other things. And I just say, the positive focus, this is just the greatest thing. And so here's what it consists of. It just has 4 steps. And 4 steps, and then I'll just walk through it. So pick something today. Just pick something where any piece of progress you made in your life, any aspect of your attempt to flourish. So it can be personal, professional, it can be small, big, but anything that you regard as an achievement. And then just write down on a piece of paper, achievement, and then just in a sentence or two, write out the achievement. So for me, I might write out, I recorded the 3rd episode of the Human Flourishing Project! Exclamation point, right? You can do that if you want. I would put that in this case. Okay, great. So one of the rules for this is it can't be negative. So there's no negativity allowed in the positive focus. You can't say, well, I really sucked it up today, but at least I managed to record a podcast. No, it has to be purely positive, and that's an important kind of discipline. You can write negative stuff elsewhere, but not in the positive focus. So that's what you write. So that's just achievement, and then whatever the achievement is. And another aspect is it can't be delusional. Now, many of you listening are probably too hard on yourself in general, but if you are ever delusional and you misrepresent things to yourself, can't do that here because otherwise this is going to work against you. But if you're accurate, whether it's small or big, you're in great shape. Okay, great. So first step is just write down the achievement. Second one is write down reason why, and then just identify why this progress was important to your life and to your goals, or you can think of it as to your flourishing. So I might say, and it doesn't have to be elaborate. You can write more if you want, but it can just be a sentence. I'm going to say, recording this episode was tremendously enjoyable, and I felt like I gave it a real shot to help my listeners with an issue that could really have a transformative effect the rest of their lives. So that's a reason why, to me, this is important to my life and to my goals. So just write down, second thing, reason why it was important. Doesn't matter if it's big or small, just getting this. So you've got an achievement, why it was important. And if you're doing this, and I recommend doing it live now, you can pause, of course, at any time and do it. You might start to feel a certain good feeling, feel some momentum. Then the next thing is write down further progress, So further progress, And here's where you want to write down any strategic thoughts that you have about how you can make further progress in the future. And sometimes you may be inspired and have a whole bunch of ideas, but it can just be a sentence as well. So let's think. So I've recorded this episode, and I explain why it's important. Now, why is it important? How can I make further progress in the future? Well, I might just think, okay, well, one way I can make further progress in the future is to really encourage people to give me feedback on what they find most and least valuable so far. So I think if I can do that, then that will inevitably make the project much better, because I'll make sure that I'm really helping the people that I want to help instead of doing something that might be too specific to me. So just a few sentences like that. So further progress, that's my strategic thoughts on how to make further progress. And then the next one, and the final thing, just write down first action, and then just name the very first action or next action that you're going to take to make the progress. So in this case, I'm literally just going to do something out loud on the show. It's going to be make sure to encourage people, again, to email me with any comments that they have on the show. So I'm doing that right now. Make sure to email me with any comments you have on the show, including on this episode. So great. So now what I've experienced is I had an achievement. I recognized it as an achievement, which is not something we normally do, or we're not normally taught to do. And then I've bolstered it by saying, hey, here's why it matters. So I've connected this to all my goals in life, or at least to some of my goals in life. And then I've thought about, with that momentum and clarity, how to, what I can do more. And I'm motivated because I already had accomplishment. So then I have all this momentum, and I can bring that into the future. And then I've solidified that by taking immediate action. I figured out an immediate action that's bite-sized that I can take. And now I felt motivated. In this case, I just did it immediately. But even if it was something that took half an hour, I would feel motivated to do it. Now, positive focus. If you just do these 4 steps with 3 items a day, I think you'll see that you'll enjoy each day more. You'll progress on these projects. And in general, your life will just have this momentum that it didn't have before, or you'll have more momentum. Because every day you'll just be winning. Even when you have a rough time, you can just select, okay, I really did learn this positive lesson. Don't even talk about the negative thing. If you screwed something up at work, whatever, just say, okay, I learned this lesson. Here's why that's important. Here's how I can make further progress. Here's the first action that I'm going to take. It's just amazing what doing these things in the right order and just deciding to do them every day, it's just amazing how much that can help you. And I think part of it, which is what makes it effective, is that I'm sure Dan Sullivan has thought about it and tested it a lot with himself and with others. And so there are reasons for each stage of this. And I don't claim to know exactly why all of them work or exactly why he did it the way he did. And this is not to say this is the only way of doing it. This is just something I can say from my experience and from others' experience. This is a really effective way to do it. So this tool is not a principle of life that's an absolute, you must use this tool to flourish. But in terms of having the right way, having an effective method of evaluating progress and growth, that really is essential to flourishing. So I highly recommend, as your next action, just try this. Just even try it for one thing. And if you want to get really advanced, try it twice a day. Sometimes I'll do my positive focus in the middle of the day, particularly if I ever feel myself slowing down or I feel myself frustrated. Counterintuitively, often the best thing to do is, okay, let's do a positive focus. Let's see where our progress has been, and then that's going to create focus and momentum. So the more positive focus I've done, the greater enjoyment I have, the greater momentum I have, and also the greater focus I have on what really matters. Because by focusing on my achievements, in part I'm identifying to myself what really matters to me, and I want more of that. So in terms of what you should do next, I like to always suggest an exercise at the end of this program. So today it's really simple. Share one positive focus with the group on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/Human Flourishing Project and then do the 4 steps: achievement, reason why, further progress, first action. And just share it with anything, big or small, as long as it's not private or it's not going to get you in trouble. And if you do this, and if others do it, I think you'll get a lot of momentum. And then just try to figure out a way to do it as part of your routine. One thing I'm making a note of is I work with an assistant, and I'm going to have her remind me to do it in the middle of the day. I almost always do it at the end of the day, but I at least want her to remind me to do it in the middle of the day, because I think, now that I think about it, it'll make things that much better. So biggest takeaway today is that we need, if we want to flourish, we need to figure out how to enjoy the progress, the process rather of growth and progress as much as possible. If we want to flourish, we need to enjoy the process of growth and progress as much as possible. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfectly enjoyable. There are a lot of difficulties, but we want to be on the premise of let's enjoy this, because if we're flourishing, growth and progress is really part of flourishing. So we need to figure out how to do that. And then the key thing is to change how we measure it and stop measuring it by what's the negative distance between now and the future, and then start measuring as what's the positive distance between the past and now. And if we can do that, we're going to be experiencing the gain on a regular basis, and over time, it will just really help us in terms of how we approach life, and ultimately in terms of what matters in life. And the more we measure things this way, the more we use tools like the positive focus, the more we're going to be focused on and motivated by the positive in life. This is a case where the effort that it takes to test out a claim to knowledge, my claim that this measurement is really effective and that this tool is effective, this is a 5-minute investment. So one thing that's great with seeking knowledge, validating knowledge, integrating knowledge, is when we can find a way of testing things that's really has a really low downside. It's not, what are you going to die by doing this? It's hard to imagine a super downside to trying the positive focus, but there's a really large potential upside. So even if we don't have a fully vetted longitudinal study about 1 billion people using the positive focus, it makes sense and it's still worth trying. And I wish there were that many things in life that had this much upside, that were this cost effective to try. So definitely try it. All right, that is it for today. I'm glad I made it a shorter episode, around half an hour this time. This is more the length that I want to work with, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And in any case, I hope that you share any kinds of thoughts you have about this episode or the other episode. So if you want to email me, my email address is alex@alexepstein.com. I would definitely encourage you to go to the Facebook page and also to share the information about this with other students of life that you think would really benefit from the systems focus to knowledge that we're taking to really try to get people that real knowledge that they need to flourish. So recommend the Facebook page, or go to humanflourishingproject.com, although there's been some issues with that technically, but at least try to sign up there and we'll try to fix those by the time that you hear this. Also, the show should be very soon up on iTunes, and it's already on pretty much any other podcast platform. So encourage people to use it there, whether it's Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher. I think it's up on all of those. So we're getting to the stage ramping up, and it'll be on YouTube very soon. We almost have the video of episode 1 done, and at a certain point, we'll have them release almost at the same time on YouTube. But once we can get it on all of those, then we can really share this mission and this content with a lot of people. And then I'm really excited just to see what kind of community we can build and what kind of knowledge we can build. So that's it for this time. Until next week, I'm Alex Epstein, and this has been the Human Flourishing Project.